In this episode, I spoke with Desmond Bowles, who is a 29-year-old filmmaker, storyteller, and aspiring modern-day philosopher. Having just returned from a decent amount of time working in Asia, he is now best described as a digital nomad who spends his free time neck-deep in his own creative projects and other projects he collaborates on with friends. Desmond therefore spends a lot of time working with media, and during our preamble, he ran straight into our topic for the day.
Media creation is its own, it is a field and it is a practice. It has its own unique digital tools, which others might not experience. Most people nowadays do photo editing and whatnot, even just for their own social media, but video editing is a wholly different thing. And being a media creator, you kind of need to have a tighter finger on the pulse of digital trends and digital society and digital culture.
This idea that things like society and culture happen within digital spaces, and that the technologies we use are possibly more than just helpful tools, was exactly what I was curious about. In my research, I have seen the term media ecology used to describe this relationship between humans and the digital or technological worlds we have created for ourselves. So, to start the conversation, I asked Desmond what he thinks the term might mean.
So I'm going to break it apart, and I think media is the more intuitively understandable phrase there. Everything created that is consumed, whether fiction or nonfiction, whether text, audio, picture, painting, performance art in the street. But ecology, you're looking at the interconnected web of different agents in that ecology. So the producers of media, the consumers of media, the transmitters of media. Ecology looks at organisms and their environment. So what is the infrastructure that we use to share media and engage with media?
I think that description of media ecology fits quite well, especially with the academic side of media ecologies and the study of media ecologies, which was a discipline that started with a scholar called Lewis Mumford, who used to work in a very, very interdisciplinary space in the 20th century. And he started off looking at ecology and saying that ecology is this circle of things in which nothing exists in isolation. Everything exists, and every action that happens has an impact on everything else within that ecological system, and then kind of took that very biological, very scientific idea and started transposing it onto technologies. And this was technologies in the 20th century, when technologies were still landline phones and servers that were the sizes of rooms, and people already then starting to go, hey, these aren't just tools. These aren't just things that exist in the peripheries. These are things that are going to start impacting how humans work and what humans do. And that's, it makes me very curious. I think looking at technology and technological objects in a slightly different way.
It is always challenging to look at technology as just a tool, because even just as a tool, it changes the way we work, which changes what we make, and it changes our whole lifestyle. So if you look at the tools and the technology of the Industrial Revolution, that changed our sleeping patterns, our interaction routine patterns. It created rush hour traffic and the 9-to-5 system. Then jumping ahead a little, looking at not just technology, but media technology. In the 1900s, you had the popularization of radio, which became like the modern hearth that the family gathered around.
It seems easy enough to understand how machines we built during the 1900s allowed us to do new things, and that there were certain new behaviors that came with them. The extent to which technology and media influences daily human life in the 21st century, however, seems to be a little bit different to the 1900s. So Desmond and I continued to explore what changed in media and technology.
So for me, two huge technologies that radically changed the flow of communication and the flow of production power in media ecologies has been obviously the internet and mobile phone technology. Or if you want to broaden it, you could say personalized computing. And with the birth of the internet and later on the smartphone, being a hugely versatile tool. I mean, cell phones of the 1900s were exactly that. They were phones. In the 1900s, technology and media technology was this very top-down hub where information came from production houses and media studios, or like the print newspaper, but it was something you went to and you visited on its time and its terms.
There was a media ecology that existed in the 1900s, but it was almost still an opt-in, opt-out system. Whereas now there's a media ecology that permeates. And I think whether you're willing to be part of the technological paradigm or not, you are. What's changed from the 1900s to now is the fact that I don't feel like there's a division between technology and humans in our daily lives.
That is another huge step, is the change from the internet being something we visited when we had the access and the money to something that is always around us and always on. Like Twitter doesn't sleep and you fall behind the news if you don't stay on it. So the fact of always on internet, everyone being connected and everyone having these powerful technological tools to create media, we've now got the global platform to share it and the global personalized means of everybody making it. And that's a huge change from the 1900s models where BBC made media and you listened to it and you either agreed with it or didn't. And most of the times you had to agree with it. Whereas now I can make a video in a morning, upload it, have 1 million people see it by the afternoon and all wildly agree or disagree, and it creates these spaces of communication.
That media ecology that we had has become so much more intricate. And it's become, I want to use the word democratized in order to apply the fact that anybody has the ability to create and input, and everybody has the option to receive and comment. If we start talking about that, what does that mean if we say that now technology and media are becoming agents in society?
So I see positivity and I see like a beacon of hope in the sense that in the 1950s, Hollywood produced certain types of media, and the Western world consumed that media. And if you were of the privileged in-group, that was maybe a white, male, middle-class, heterosexual person going to the cinema to watch that movie, you saw your life reflected in the media consumed. And you're like, this is me, I identify with it. This is the world. And if you were a black person watching something in the 1940s or 1950s, you were like, oh, this does not reflect my experience of life around me. And there's a problem with that. The wealthy, privileged middle class and upper class of the 1950s had no idea that other people experienced life differently, or they had a very limited idea, because all the media they consumed in newspaper, radio, movies, it reflected their experience of life. I feel now more than ever there is an opportunity and a possibility for us to see other people having other experiences of life that are different from ours. And a huge part of that is because I, as a user of Facebook or a user of YouTube, am also a producer of the content, whether that's in the comments I leave or whether that's in the pictures I upload and posts I share. I don't just consume media that represents my life. I create media and share it with others.
Desmond was describing the process of technologies, specifically personalized technologies that are part of a global network via the internet, becoming a part of how humans express themselves and communicate information with one another. This seems to suggest that media and technology may be able to impact how we think, work, and behave, and suddenly the separation between humans as subjects and media or technology as objects becomes a little bit blurry. It almost seemed as if technology was more an extension of ourselves than simply a tool that we use by choice.
So, like looking at cell phones, there was a time when cell phones were an advanced, useful tool to specific professions. Like if you were a doctor and you needed to be on call, it was better than a pager. If you were a businessman and you needed to have conversations with people whilst on the go, then it was useful. But the technology became cheaper to produce, and therefore more people started using it, and more people found uses for it. And the uses for cell phones grew. that also led the producers of cell phones to start rethinking, what is a cell phone? What can I put into it? What extra features? You know, the earliest cell phones didn't have calendars, alarm clocks built in. It was purely used for person-to-person communication. And nowadays, I could spend an hour sitting here talking about all the uses of my cell phone. So as the uses grew and the upheld belief about how valuable or necessary a cell phone is in modern culture, I think that's when the technology sort of starts changing from just an object external to my daily lifestyle to something that's also a subject, where if I don't have it, or if I choose not to have it, it impacts how I can communicate and interact with the rest of the culture that deems it as such a vital part of culture.
Do you think there is some sort of valuable application to realizing and becoming aware of the fact that technology and media aren't just things that we use, aren't just tools that we pick up and put down, but are becoming part of personal identities, the way we function and work, the way we think and behave, and kind of influence much more about us than we usually give them credit for?
I mean, I think it is important to acknowledge the social, psychological role that technology and tools have on our lifestyle. To simply ignore it and pretend that, oh, internet access and digital communities don't change vital aspects of a person's life, like their education, their employability, their psychological health and happiness. So if you just pretend that, oh, technology is a tool that doesn't shape every vital aspect of a person's life, I think we might ignore drastic changes that are happening. And that's downright silly to not use that data and blatantly ignore the causes that are having real world effects on us. And secondly, if we do acknowledge that technology is a subject that has real world effects on so many aspects of our life, we can start researching that and understanding it better, and therefore using it actively to make positive changes in our world.
Researching these notions has been happening since the 1960s. Ursula Franken was discussing the notion of the real world of technology in 1989, where she was doing lectures in which she described technology as the house in which we all live.
I really love that metaphor of like the digital infrastructure being the house that we've built to live in. And like China's got Baidu and all that and WeChat, and it's got its own house it's living in. But even like Facebook is a whole neighborhood with a series of houses, and you can live in like the liberal, eco-vegan hippie house where your newsfeed reflects your life, and you see liberal posts, you see vegan-friendly posts, you see anti-animal cruelty and save the environment posts. But I feel now more than ever there is an opportunity and a possibility for us to see other houses and see other people having other experiences of life that are different from ours.
From here, our conversation digressed a little, discussing how media and technology could therefore either continue or dismantle systems of power and exclusion, and how we might classify things like AI, which are no longer managed like humans and seem to be making human-like decisions for themselves. This went on for a while before we began to wrap up the conversation. But before I switched off the mics, I asked Desmond what the major takeaways from this conversation could be.
Some of the major takeaways are acknowledging that in the 1900s we had subjects that made media, and for the most part humans were in an object sense just consuming the media, and that's all they could do with it. And with the democratization, in like the Greek philosophy sense, in the democratization of digital communication, it's now become much more of a two-way street, where I can absorb and consume the media, and then I can speak to the producers and say, the end of that season of that show was terrible, please remake it. There's now much more of a two-way street where every consumer can simultaneously be a producer. And then looking at how media as an object is also a subject that affects our views on life and how we act in society and how we act with one another and what we value and what we strive for. Knowing that I, as a consumer of media that espouses certain ideologies and values on me, I can then create my own media to support these ideologies or counteract them.
Where so often people want to primarily talk about the effects of technology and media on human life, Desmond was instead looking at the opportunities that our 21st century media ecologies create. These include new methods for self-expression or connection with others, as well as new patterns for social interactions and structures. I quite appreciated the more optimistic outlook, and I will try to be more mindful about those aspects of media and technology the next time I work on my laptop or pick up my phone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Jamie Ashton. Until the next one.